whole idea of the brand was tools for the man on the journey to find himself.
That was this week's guest, Alex McAfee, and this is Conscious Conversations. My name's Luke McLean. I'm a meditation teacher and I'm a sort of a life and leadership coach. I work with leaders and teams on what I call holistic high performance. So it's basically looking at the whole person and getting the whole person to perform really at a high level, which are two of my real joys is around high performance. I love people that can perform at a really high level, but I think it takes the whole person. And it's sort of based in what you'd call mindfulness and meditation and how to manage energy over time, amongst some other things. But that's a real passion of mine, is to simply raise a consciousness in how people live and to live with more intention and authenticity. This podcast this week with Alex McAfee, who is he's a former rock climber who traveled the world climbing some of the really high peaks and some of the really dangerous spots, and we talk through his adventures and what he learned from those adventures, of when it literally is life and death, when you've got to listen, when you've got to be calm in the confusion, and then how he's applied those tools to his business. He's got two businesses right now called Fast and Light Agency and Conrad Men's. Fast and Light Agency is more of a digital consultancy company, and Conrad Men's is a meditation cushion and bag company for men on their life journey. So you got sort of two companies that are almost like polar opposites that really work together. But in this conversation, it's Alex's poise, it's his coolness and his calmness and his ability to create space to think, to make good decisions that shines through. He's very well educated around mindfulness and meditation and even Buddhism, and he really looks after himself and keeps himself in great shape. And it's how he brings that across in this conversation that's great, because it's a casual conversation, but it's littered with these nuggets of real gold within learnings. So I want you to sort of grab a notepad and a pen and take some notes, because I've listened to it a couple of times already and it's a real beautiful conversation. So if you want to check out a little bit more of myself, it's Luke McLean _mindfulness on Instagram, or it's just lukemclean.net on the website. So, if you're interested in what I'm doing, please check me out. Shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to respond. If you want to get a bit of Alex and catch up with what he's doing, Fast and Light on Instagram, Fast and Light Agency, or Conrad Men's, go to Instagram, sort of check it out. If you're into meditation, cushions and cool stuff, Conrad Men's is a really nice site to pick it up from, and you can explore further from there. But, without further ado, this is Conscious Conversations, and this is Alex McAfee, and welcome. Starting from like when you were young, like the rock climbing and where you got to there, sort of how that all came about.
So yeah, the rock climbing, I don't know. I grew up in a small town and I was into like skateboarding and mountain biking, and then I tried climbing and that was pretty much it. I was all super tall, so they made me play like basketball and track and all these other sports, but climbing was kind of it for me. It was kind of like one of those things, like when you meet that like girl and you're like, this is the one. It was one of those moments of like, I loved it as soon as I did it. I was instantly good at it, and just fell into a place of where it became part of my life very quickly, of where, within a few months I was going to the gym in St. Paul. Within a few months of that, they opened up a climbing wall at the local community center where I started working. From there, I met all these old timers between back then I was 16, so I met these guys between 35 and like in their 50s, and these guys were taking me on like really big routes, like ice climbing, like 300-foot ice climbing routes, bringing me to Devil's Tower, which is about 1,000-foot, pretty good sized route, and that's all I wanted to do.
And what was it like? as a young guy, sort of having this interest in climbing, but like when you sort of then get into a community where there's a lot of older guys that are climbing, that older influence, like how did that shape you in terms of, growing up and sort of developing into a man a little bit quicker? Did it sort of ground you a bit more in who you were?
I've always felt like, I guess, an old soul. I've always felt more comfortable around older people,
Yeah.
from like guys to women to whatever. And when you're climbing, it's one of those things where like your age or your income or your class, it doesn't really matter. It's all about the climbing.
Yeah.
And there's like a real brotherhood in that, of where it's just amazing. Everybody comes together in that community and is really supportive. As far as like growing with those guys, it was, I don't know, there wasn't even that. It was just like the thing that I liked about climbing was that it was a purpose. Like, we're going to go from here, and we're going to go over there. We're going to have an adventure along the way. With
the climbing at a young age, how quickly or how important was like the care factor? Like, because it's a livelihood type of thing. If you make a mistake, you've got to, check your knots. You've got to make sure, like, those skills, how did they hold you instead when you were young, but also later on in life?
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, it is life and death, right? So it's pounded into you that you need to double check, you need to triple check.
Yeah.
You need to check your partner, and your partner needs to check you. And so there is never a single point of failure. And even now within my companies, I have a digital marketing agency. I've got Conrad. Even just designing Conrad stuff, I want to make sure that there's no single point of failure. So like, I'm redesigning my handles on my bags because right now there's only one rivet, and if that rivet blows, the handles are worthless. You're holding up the bag by like one handle. But then also just having redundancies in life, from insurance to, a bunch of people that you can call on. It's good to have community. It's good to have redundancies, whatever you do.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you, with the rock climbing, how do you sort of have the assurity and the redundancies, like, and that, but also that free life of adventure and sort of living day to day, which you sort of see with the rock climbing community, that it's not they're happy to camp in the cars and sort of just adventure on what they do. Like, how does that play out? Yeah,
it's like the climbing is kind of your purpose, and knowing to trust your gear and knowing your skills and placing the gear and having that trust in your partner allows you to be free. It allows you, like if you want to learn how to paint, you learn how to paint realistically, and then you can, do the abstract stuff. So having the confidence in your partners and your materials and all that lets you do the things that are the variables. So it lets you go on an adventure. And that's the whole thing about adventure. Like, if you knew what was going to happen, it wouldn't be an adventure.
Yeah.
And so knowing that the tools are going to work and you're doing the things and you've prepared and you're assessing the risks that are in front of you, and you're making calculated decisions.
Yeah.
But then the freedom of the lifestyle is you have a purpose, but then you can just travel around and kind of know that your friends are we're gypsies, right?
Yeah.
So I can show up in Alaska or the Bugaboos or in Canyonlands, and I know a bunch of my friends will be there.
Yeah. Okay.
With a partner. Yeah.
And how do you like interact and meet so many different? Is it just the traveling and the journey where you sort of, because you are isolated on the mountains when you're young, that you have to become friends, you have to become connected, which, these days, more in the digital life, you don't. So you sort of, know people but don't know them intimately.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that because there wasn't cell phones. Like, if you would need a partner, like, you show up to Yosemite and there's a bulletin board with like notes on the side of the board, and you go talk to this guy in camp number 26 and see what he's up to, and you really connect. But it's nice now that my partner from Salt Lake, we used to climb a bunch in the 90s together. I've known him since 96, and it's nice that I can reconnect with him. I haven't seen him in a decade, but he's got a family and a job and doing the whole thing, and so it's nice to reconnect with him there. But back in the day, there's that discovery that I think is missing now.
Yeah.
Because there's so much information about everything from, people are climbing El Capitan, Yosemite with cell phones, and you're getting like live reports.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So and then also just meeting people. Yeah. You can just meet people through social media, or you can, which is also nice because I can find people, and I've met a lot of people through Instagram that I'm really good friends with now.
Yeah.
But the adventure of just life itself, of kind of knowing a little bit about Yosemite or knowing a little bit about this climbing area and just kind of showing up and being able to discover a lot of it on your own rather than having expectations of what you've seen on social media or other places. There's a lot less discovery in the world, as far as I feel. Yeah.
And the adventures you sort of through, was it most of your adventures and experiences that you sort of had when you were young, was it through climbing, or was it just through a want to travel and live in different cities and just experience life, as it is?
Yeah. I wanted to climb. Like, climbing was like it for me, right?
Yeah.
But I also, and a lot of the movement was around the types of climbs that I wanted to do. So the later part of when I was climbing a lot, I wanted to do more alpine and ice climbing. So, I knew I needed to get a bunch of ice climbing in, so I moved down to Telluride, where I could get, 4 to 5 days a week of ice climbing in at the park there in Ouray. Yeah. And then, I moved to Jackson Hole because I was close to Canada. But then after climbing, I still wanted to experience the world, and I saw so many people, like my family's still in the same town, and they travel a little bit, but I know plenty of people that have never left the state.
Yeah.
And there's so many things to experience, even if you're in a city or even if you're in your own hometown. I didn't want to have the same experience every day. I didn't want to live in Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
And after climbing, I moved to New York City. I was in Chicago a lot. I was in Boulder. And that was the thing about climbing, that I was so singularly focused on climbing that there's all these experiences that I never had.
Yeah.
Like, I'd never been to New York, and then I wanted to move there. Climbing was searching for where I belonged, because climbing was my purpose. And that was really hard for me.
Yep.
Finding a purpose after climbing is it's kind of like, what am I going to do now, right? Especially since I dedicated so much of my life and time to that I tried a lot of different things, but then eventually I did land in LA, and, I did have some sort of awakening about, I don't know, I want to say 7-8 years ago, where a lot of other things kind of fell into place. But until I got to LA, I was really searching for the place. And when I moved to Venice specifically, I really felt like home, where I felt settled.
Yeah, okay. We'll go back in a minute, but what's that feeling of searching that you had? Like, what can you dig into that a little bit more? Like, what did that feel like for you?
So it is kind of like that gut feeling of where, like, this isn't right, and this is close, but it's not quite what I'm looking for. Or it's good when you're there, and then eventually you're like, I've kind of done this, I've had this experience, I know that I'm supposed to go to the next thing. And I even had this with my first company. My first company was a website where you could book yoga retreats. Yeah. And a buddy of mine who has started a bunch of company, I was sitting at a coffee shop, and he was like, so when are you going to start the next company? And I was like, oh, I know it's probably about time.
Yeah, okay.
And you kind of know, and then, like at the end of a relationship, when you're kind of there, and then it's just hanging out in the air, and then one of you finally says, like, this isn't working.
And back to the climbing, how did that relationship end? Like, how did you come to the decision that your climbing days were numbered or done, and that you needed to move on? So
I was living in the French Alps. I was living in Chamonix.
Yep.
And I'd, shipped all my stuff over there with me. I was staying at the Jeep Vagabond, which is like this hostel thing. And I was about 27, 28. And I'd been doing a lot of like big alpine climbs. We tried to make an attempt at the Grand Juras in November. And, a lot of people call Chamonix the death sports capital of the world. And so I did have a lot of friends and heroes that were dying. And it wasn't like I was like climbing a lot on like the sunny cliffs of Spain. I was climbing like big alpine routes. And and I had this feeling. I was sitting on this fountain in Chamonix, and I was like, I knew if I stayed there, I'd be dead in 2 years. And I wasn't really okay with that. There's other things that I wanted to experience. And then I also knew, and it was almost scarier, because what if I did live through my